Be your own authentic, true leader and take responsibility for the outcome of everything in the business that you own. You can't do that if your head's in someone's mouth all the time. Yeah.
What is it that you took from your military experience?
Well, it was leadership and taking responsibility for the outcome. Follow the advice. What's the worst that could happen? There is no reward without risk. You can't work your way to wealth. I think you have to work and risk your way to wealth. But there has to be more to it than that. There has to be some social conscience to what we're doing, much like the outreach clinics in Afghanistan. There has to be more than the fight. There has to be more than the private work. There has to be more than the millions of pounds.
What is in your mindset? What makes you take that leap? It's your first practice. You never run a dental practice before.
No, I hadn't even really worked in one.
Yeah. So what the hell? Come on, Zach. Come on.
Yeah. Okay. Why?
Tell me why.
I just honestly, I wanted to be in control, and I wanted to control the money. It's essentially on us, and that's the cost you pay. But the reward, obviously, is profit. It should be 20%, roughly. So 20% of 2.5 million is nearly 500,000, and I wasn't doing any dentistry.
Wow.
It was running itself. I have a mantra where every nurse has to be on a course physically that day or booked on a course. And we create super nurses. Well, I say to you, man, do you want to work with super nurses or do you want to work with nurses that we don't invest in?
Hi guys, welcome to Dentistry Unmasked. My guest today is the inspirational Mike Hesketh. Mike qualified from Leeds in 2004. The same year I actually qualified from King's, but we didn't cross paths until 2019 when I met him as a business coach on a business coaching course. He has an absolutely inspirational story, and when I listened to this for the first time and listened to his journey, he absolutely transformed my life, my practice, my business journey. And this podcast is actually split into 2 episodes because there's not one thing I wanted you guys to miss. So Mike has actually served in the Royal Marines. He's taught Afghanistan, and there's some great stories in there just in itself. But he then, once he left the Royal Marines, brought all these skills and all this knowledge and all this experience that he gained while untaught, and then applied it to the world of dental business. He has then used these skills to build a practice in just 3 years from a very, very small practice to one that turned over 3 million. And that was Exeter Dental Centre, and what a journey that was. And he shares a few nuggets in that journey as well. So it's a great listen over 2 parts, guys. Don't miss this one. Mike has now set up Hesketh healthcare consultancy with his wife Lara. They're a formidable team. Give them a like and a follow on Instagram as well, and get in touch with Mike if you want to know more about how to grow your dental business. He's certainly transformed mine. I really hope you get something from these 2 podcasts, because I know I certainly did. I'd also just like to say a very quick thank you to our sponsors, Unique Implant Training and Former Dental Supplies. And guys, I hope you enjoy these podcasts. Thank you.
Mike, welcome to Dentistry Unmasked. Thank you so much for, making the 5-hour trip?
Yeah, from Leeds? Devon, 5 hours on the motorway for you, mate.
Oh, thank you. I'm honoured that you would, give your time. So thanks for coming. And I'm just going to very quickly just talk about how I know you, because there's going to be many people who do know you, but there's going to be quite a few people you're new to the whole dental media world. Yeah. So I first met you. You facilitated on Ashley Latter's one of Ashley Latter's courses, and I'll tell you my first impression of you. Let me just tell you this, right? So the Entrepreneurs Club is mostly practice owners. Well, it is all practice owners.
Yes.
It's all about running your own practice and running successful businesses. And then you rock up first day to tell your story. And I've just got to say that it was probably the most phenomenal story in dentistry that I've come across.
Oh, brilliant.
Which is why I've invited you to come and talk today, and this story needs to be shared. And for me, it was inspirational, and I hope everybody's going to find this story inspirational as well. And obviously the many projects that you've had and your ongoing projects as well. So we're going to talk about a lot of that today.
Brilliant.
But please, can I start by asking you, First of all, we'll go on to the dental side of things, and then we'll go on to the personal side of things. So tell me about your dental career. Tell me about where you started.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I was a Leeds graduate. We were just discussing that.
Yeah.
We're filming this in Leeds, so it's nice to walk around the city
Yeah.
and see much it's changed. Qualified in 2004.
Yeah.
I wasn't the best student in the world. I did a lot of travelling during my course. I enjoyed travelling to Australia and South Africa and working in the outback in Australia and also in the High Veld in South Africa. And I always felt like when I was doing my dentistry degree, I was always trying to find distractions. It was a choice. I went there when I was 18 and, I didn't take a gap year. And I just, I always chose my A-levels to do dentistry. I was good at sciences at school.
Yeah.
And I thought, it would suit me, a caring profession, a scientific profession. And I like interactions, with humans. I enjoy sort of finding out about people and taking care of people. So I always thought it was going to be a good choice of career for me.
Yeah.
If I'm honest, the academic side of it and the actual practical, restorative and all the different divisions of dentistry didn't always excite me, hence probably trying to always find a distraction at university.
Yeah.
So that was my sort of dental choice. And then in my third year of dentistry at Leeds, one of the army recruiters came into the university and asked me about and did a little talk and saying, we'll pay you an annual salary. We'll pay your tuition fees at the time, which are about £1,000 at the time. And then you've got to sign on the dotted line for 7 years. And at the time, my brother was with the Royal Marine Commando Reserves out of Merseyside. And his best friend had managed to have a really good career with the Royal Marines and going into the Special Forces. And so I used to go drinking with these guys and they'd tell me stories. And then this chap in the Special Forces said, I think the Royal Marine Commandos have a dentist, but you have to join the Navy for that. So even I was 20 years old, my third year of university, I joined the Royal Navy as an officer. I went down to do the Admiralty interview board.
As an undergrad, you did?
As an undergraduate, yeah.
Okay.
So then they gave me 3 years worth of salary, which I managed to drink my way through and party my way through and just about get through dental school. And then I had a 7-year career in the Royal Navy right from age 22. I left Leeds and went down to Portsmouth, Pompey Carlo, down to the Sunshine. And I was straight into the Royal Navy. My dentistry degree in Leeds was okay. I played more football for the university and did more sports and, like I say, more travelling than I did do studying. But I like the people. And I was very grateful to the Leeds Dental School for teaching me. Callum Youngson was a cracking professor at the time.
Okay,
It was brilliant.
So didn't you think at that stage, though, to give 7 years of your life was a huge commitment?
Yeah, it felt like forever at that age. Originally, when I started conversations, it was a 5-year return of service. And during the paperwork, it took a while to go through. They said, oh no, it's 7 years now. But they'd had this recruitment phase where it was vocational training and they'd double your salary. So at the time, the annual salary was $22,000 for a vocational trainee in the NHS. And that's what everyone was doing around Leeds. Everyone would go to university, sort of tutors practices. And then they said it was 44,000 in the Navy. So I thought, well, there's a salary there, it's pensions. I was pretty clued into that sort of thing. And I thought, I want to buy a property, my first sort of flat, which I did with my brother in Altrincham in Manchester. And there were other benefits, but it was this thing where in the Royal Navy, there were 3 commando units. And the one in Somerset called 40 Commando, that's their dentist was just about to leave. So I was already lined up to take that role. So I knew that there was a career pathway for me with the Royal Marine Commandos because I didn't want to just be a dentist on a ship within the broader Royal Navy. The Royal Marine Commandos are the infantry for the Royal Navy. So they're the elite. They feed about 70 to 80% of UK Special Forces. So you have 700 of them on a base and you're their dentist. So these are elite athletes. Some of them have Olympic medals in rowing and athleticism. So a lot of them are Oxbridge graduates, and they do a return of service of 4 years. And so they're a really elite organisation to work with. And I ended up spending 5 years of my career with 40 Commando traveling over the world, around the world. And I think that was the most formative time of everything that I talk about within the business consultancy that I run, or running my own businesses, dental practices.
Okay. And so when did you leave? When did that service finish?
Yeah, so that was I qualified in 2004, as we talked about, and I left the Royal Navy in 2011.
Yeah.
So I did 8 years, I think. I had a very fulfilling career, and that's called a short-term commission. The time that I did there, I did the Royal Marine Commando course. So I went and got the Green Beret, and where we currently live, my house overlooks the mud flats on the River Exe, where we were crawling through and getting covered in mud. And I was a dentist on a chunky salary, and I'd be lying next to a British sniper or a RAF fast jet pilot or a padre, a vicar, or a doctor, and you'd all be having this challenge, and it was called the All Arms Commando course. So you go through this, it's almost like an abridged version of the commando course. It's usually 30 weeks. And what they say is, and every 4 to 6 weeks there's a criteria test, a physical test that you've got to get through. Most of it's in your head and most of it's technique. And with the All Arms Commando course, it's can they break you? Okay. So you're already, as like I say, a trained officer in the military, and can you keep up and can they break you? And it's a bit different now. That was, 13, 14 years ago. You'd hope that it would be a little bit, a bit more sensible. But if you're injured, you're off the course. If you can't do the criteria test at the end of, instead of being 4 or 6 weeks, it was every week. So 1 week you do a 9-mile speed march carrying weight. The next one you do a 12-mile load carry across Salisbury Plain or Dartmoor. So these physical stresses, it's a very humbling environment, because whether you're, it was a couple of stone ago that I did this course, but I'm
still looking great, mate. Come on.
Yeah, no, I need to get on the bike. But yeah, no. So I do. I'm the average height of a male in the UK, and now this matters. Okay, all the special forces guys are all dinky fellas because they don't burn as much energy when they're moving. If you're too tall and you're good at a load carry, then across the moor, then you're good at that, but you might not be able to climb the ropes, and you might not be able to do the assault courses and the Tarzan assault courses. So it's a very humbling experience, and that was one of the things I want to do. Is that one, they have a bit of a New Zealand All Blacks sort of thing on a no dickheads policy. Okay, the Royal Marine Commandos, they see arrogance as the enemy. There it is a walk softly and carry a big stick sort of organisation of elite. And when people go and do mountain leaders courses in the Arctic, or they go and do jungle training, or they do sniper training, they come back to these commando units and they spread the skill set. So you're already surrounded by elite environment people. And I was a witness to this for 7 years. I was a witness to this high level elite performance. And because I was an officer, as a dentist, you go in as a naval lieutenant. I was in this environment where I would see high level planning of moving units around the world at a moment's readiness. We were in Sierra Leone, we were in the Congo, we were in Northern Europe, on the Baltic, and then obviously culminated in Afghanistan when it was really bad in 2007. And it was all hands to the pump. And I felt like I had a very, very good stint at being distracted from dentistry. Yeah. And I was lying in a muddy stream being paid to be a dentist on Dartmoor. And, but I would rather get that green beret at the end, get through the course, get the green beret, be part of the crew, and then use those skill sets. But I was always a dentist. I would always do dentistry on the base and look after people. Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting.
May I ask a few more questions about that?
Yeah, sure.
So in Afghanistan, was it like Afghanistan?
Yeah.
Or was it?
Yeah. It was really
on
bad.
The peripheries of Afghanistan. No. How does it work as a dentist in the armed services?
Yeah. Well, that was everything. So if you do the commando course, like I say at Lympstone, you get your green beret, and then if I can just rewind slightly, we were on a ship off the coast of Africa on the Congo in Sierra Leone, and we were doing training there. And then overnight, all of the the flotilla went dark, and our ship was loaded with supplies, and then some of the darker side of life came on board, and it just so happened that there was a warlord in Kinshasa in the Congo that was going to take the city. Now, the Congo is a French dependency, so we made the biggest ship in the Royal Navy look really small, and we hid off the coast of the Congo for 2 months, hiding from the French, essentially, so we weren't responsible for evacuating those guys. But on 2 days' notice, we never had to go into the Congo and evacuate the embassy, but we'd built models, and my role as a dentist was as a medic. Because you don't realise it, as a dentist, you know, 5 years of university, you can pick up wider medical training quicker than the young Marine who then becomes a medic, who's like a paramedic. Okay. So I did the paramedics courses, pre-deploying on that ship, and the paramedics courses down in Cornwall, I did mine. The main method of injury was a road traffic accident. Whereas in the military, you then do battlefield advanced trauma life support, where the mechanism of injury was blast injuries and gunshot wounds. So you do all these courses, and then we were what's called the medical party, but I was a right-hand person to the doctor in the command unit. And so my role would have been to be helicoptered in, be in one of the hospitals just across the river, evacuation points, assess the people out of the embassy, and then get home. Now, the reason I tell you this is because Afghanistan was really kicking off then. It was 2007. Prince Harry was attached to us to do a week's training, and what happened was we were off the coast of the Congo. We decided this guy wasn't going to invade Kinshasa, so we were helicoptered into Sierra Leone, into Freetown, jumped on a plane and straight back to the UK. And I remember I didn't even get to see my wife, Lara. I literally was taxied back to the base in Somerset, and had to go and stand in a field with Prince Harry looking at how to clear mines in Afghanistan. So it was a quick transition from paramedics courses to jungle fighting to being at sea for 2 months, straight back to the UK, training to go to Afghanistan. So that's the background to getting out there.
Wow.
Yeah, so there was a bit of stuff that went into it. I had to render the 700 Royal Marine Commandos dentally fit as well.
In between all that.
Yeah, we had to do that. Well, they were a captive audience on the ship as well, to be honest with you, so they were quite easy to treat, and I actually treated all the air crew as well. But yeah, so you render them dentally fit, and what you don't want is a group of 700 young men who you need fighting to have dental injuries, and that's where the Armed Forces dental care came from the First World War. I think the studies showed that they lost 10 to 15% of their manpower from dental injuries in the trenches, and that was when all the Armed Forces dental industry was, or groups were formed, and it's a tri-service between the RAF Army and the Royal Navy. Yeah. So yeah, and then we deployed to Afghanistan.
Hi guys, are you thinking about getting into dental implantology? Well, if you didn't know, I'm one of the founding members of Unique Implant Training. Unique Implant Training is now in its 5th year, and we are now fully EduQual accredited to diploma level, which is an 18-month diploma, the only 18-month implant diploma currently in the UK. So if you want to begin your implant journey, please don't hesitate to give us a call. Find us at www.uniqueimplantraining.co.uk. We look forward to seeing you soon. And I mean, if you don't mind me just probing a little bit deeper into that, did you see anything which made you just think, "Fuck, this is serious"?
Yeah,
because my assumption was always just like, you know, I'm going to just go slightly off piste here. We've got quite a strong military heritage in my family.
Right.
My mum's brother, so my uncle, proper uncle, is a brigadier in the Indian Army.
Right.
You know, both of my cousins, so his boys have gone into the army in some way, shape or form.
Right, okay.
They've exited now, they've got careers in IT. But there's that heritage there.
Yeah.
So when that, you know, recruitment took place at undergraduate level, I was slightly tempted to just think, you know, shall I explore this? But I just thought, no, it's not for me. That's my uncle's family, it's not my family kind of thing. And I never went down that path. But I always assumed that being a dentist attached to the armed forces would mean that you're at the base, would mean that you're away from the front line, would mean that you don't really get to see, you know, a lot of the battle scars, should we say?
Yeah.
But it sounds like you did.
Yeah, I think my mum would assume that as well.
Yeah.
So I didn't tell my mum that I'd deployed forward. Yeah, there was. It was a bit like MASH, actually, for the first 3 months. So the TV program in the American Vietnam, there was a hospital TV program. And it was all, so we were in a Role 3 environment, which is a big hospital and people come off the helicopters injured. And that was to do surgery. And I was doing dentistry during the day. And it was a big base, 10,000 people. So there were 700 of us Royal Marines. And then there was the rest of the Army support services. And that was it was worse, actually, than the second 3 months that I spent. And the reason why it was worse was because it got so bad in the Helmand River in the valley that all of the commander units, Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, there's 100 in each, right? And their support services, they're all in charge of forward operating bases around a place called Sangin. And Sangin was famous as a big battle that the Paras had taken control of. By the time we got there, we put satellites around it to protect it in the desert. Now, my day job was fixing teeth, working in the hospital. But then the commanding officer of the Royal Marine Commandos was like, we don't know what happens to our lads as they go through the hospital when they're injured, gunshot wounds or blast injuries. Can you stand at the end of the bed and be the casualty liaison officer? I was like, yeah, sure. Anything I can do to help, that'd be brilliant. And then in the evenings when my dentistry had finished, I'd go into the headquarters and I'd sit on a radio and I would process information from the signallers and pass that information via live text that would go up, and also give the brief on where each one of our casualties were. But because I deployed with these guys, I knew them really well. They were friends. And there was officers coming through. And I caught up with a mate recently and we were chatting about it a little bit. I openly talk about it. That's why I cope with it. And he was saying, yeah, there was a bit of a feeling that you'd spent a lot of times at the end of beds of your friends. And then, so in their wisdom, they said, we're going to send you forward. And they sent me forward. And they gave me a role called Officer in Command of Outreach. And the idea was to try and bring hearts and minds, support to healthcare, engineers, payments, trying to help the local community with some of our advanced healthcare environment. But to sum it up, after I'd moved out of that role and I'd gone forward, every road move we were on was ambushed or it hit a landmine, whether it was Russian legacy from the Mujahideen or whether it was from our whether it's from the Taliban with IEDs. Every base I was in was rocketed. Every foot patrol we were on, we were contacted, small arms fires or rockets. So we were caught in ambushes. So my role was to try and, while they would have a big push somewhere else to try and get some of the bombers and some of the Taliban, they would use our force with the Gurkhas. So the Gurkha engineers to try and help bring water to the little villages around these forward operating bases. And then, but the Taliban didn't see it like that. They didn't know what we were doing. They just saw us all on the ground, so they just had a pop at us all the time. And so, unfortunately, there were men killed, rocket-propelled grenades over my head.
Gosh.
Lots of injuries. And I ended up using that paramedic skills that I talked about earlier, on the ground, stretcher carrying away. Yeah. Carrying people out with eye injuries, gut injuries. And it's quite a strange environment, is that there was people injured, local population, that'd be brought to the camp thinking we'd be able to help them, and there'd be me and a junior doctor who wasn't even a GP. And because we didn't know sometimes how these guys were injured, they wouldn't send a helicopter from the hospital that I'd just spent 3 months in. They wouldn't send a helicopter forward. They wouldn't risk it. So they wouldn't save these people. So I'm stood there, with this wagon full of injured children and saying, you're going to have to drive all the way to Kandahar or Kabul, knowing that they wouldn't make it, knowing that we couldn't really do much other than provide first aid to our troops and then ship our troops out. Some of the politics of it was just awful. Absolutely atrocious. Yeah.
Did you ever get to a point, because obviously we've seen the aftermath of that now, right?
Yeah.
Did you ever have an inkling that, or did you ever have a feeling that, is it worth it? Is it worth being here? Are we doing some good here? Is this going to have a long term?
Yeah. I knew it was futile because all the studies on outreach showed that it was futile.
Yeah.
Even when we were trying to bring female medical clinics and we took female medics out on the ground, I knew it never had any lasting effect. All of the aid organisations say this. It needs a lot more infrastructure than we were providing, but it felt good trying. We were sent to do what we were told to do. But if I'm honest with you, I thought it was under-resourced. We would go across land and find no Taliban, come back. I mean, the next day would be IEDs there, So there would be no dominance of the land. It felt like they staffed it with a minimum amount of people they could get away with politically. And this is just Mike Hesketh's opinion on this.
Okay.
It felt like a training mission by the end. I felt like they weren't putting enough people into it to have a meaningful effect, and I felt so sorry for the injured and for troops on both sides and the deaths that it caused. And all we were trying to do was provide medical aid and not get blown up.
Wow.
Had some vivid conversations with friends in the backs of vehicles and we debated what were we willing to lose. And we said, if we can get out of this, we're just losing one leg or below the knee. Really dark conversations. And that sounds quite traumatic now. But I think that experience helps me now. And in an odd way, it's because I often say, no one's dying, are they? We're in business and it's risky. And don't get me wrong, it's risky in business, and there's other social pressures and there's family pressures. And so that then led on to an utter confidence in going into business, which was the Exeter story that you heard.
Yeah.
I was almost a clean slate.
So how did you? I'm guessing then your service just came to an end because.
Yeah. So
or did you leave because?
No, do you know what? I was of a generation where we all got very lucky in that we got to do sea deployments. I did the membership of the joint faculties up in London. I did the membership in Edinburgh exams. The military paid for that. I also did MaxFax. So I came back from Afghan and I'd studied in the last month, sat in the forward operating bases. I was reading dentistry textbooks because I knew as soon as I hit the UK 2 weeks later, I was sitting in an exam in Edinburgh to do membership exams of Edinburgh. So I was going to MaxFax, and I went from working 24 hours a day in the desert to working as a junior doctor in Portsmouth underneath some fantastic consultant maxillofacial surgeons doing some cancer and trauma surgery. So I felt like I got everything that I could out of it. My wife and I lived in military accommodations, which are relatively cheap. Lara is my wife, and she was the sort of driving force behind the sort of creative industry in the background with my businesses that went forward. And Lara was working in London at the time. And so we managed to live in a pretty cheap house in London and lived a sort of a lifestyle where I was doing MaxFax in Portsmouth and Lara was in London. So it just came, and Lara was pregnant with Poppy, our first daughter, who's turning 11 this week.
Oh, congrats.
So it just came to, I felt like I got everything out of it. I felt like I got my Green Beret. I felt like I deployed. I felt like I'd got academic qualifications. It had paid me well. I felt it got everything out of me as well.
Yeah.
And I got everything out of it.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but I had no idea about business.
Well, let's go down there. So, you've done a long stint with. I want to get this right. With the Navy first.
Yeah. Everyone says the Army. I don't know. Because I think it's soldiering with the Roman Commandos. So it's the Navy and it's the... go on.
So you've done a long stint there.
Yeah.
Then you've come back and you've now gone into MaxFax, which I didn't know that about you. I didn't know that about you.
Yeah.
Right. So how do you go from being somebody who doesn't really have that much of an academic in terms of, like, you told me that dental school was kind of...
Yeah.
Which it is for a lot of people, but I mean, you spent dental school avoiding it, really, which is one of the motivations for going into the Navy. You've now done your whole service in the Navy, and you've seen some pretty, amazing things, and had some pretty out there experiences. And then you're going into MaxFax. So, I mean, people that don't know you, I'm just going to a bit of a spoiler here. You've had a phenomenal business. Yeah, that's great. So tell me about the seeds of that. How do you go from this person with a clean slate to building what was Exeter Dental Centre and that phenomenal journey? So please tell me about that.
Yeah, I think I also lent on the leadership training and then being witness to fantastic leadership, be it young officers on the ground or be it courses. So the Britannia Royal Naval College gave me my officer training. The Defence College, I did a third of a master's there in initial staff and command course, maritime. So that was leadership in the maritime environment. And then when I left, sort of fast forward, I'd done a master's in business, and I also did a coaching course in Henley Business School. So I often do things and I don't know where they're going to lead. And I think this is for any young listeners, is that just get on the course, because one, it broadens your horizon. I was a very narrow person, go straight from university, dentistry, straight into the military. Okay, seen some things, but it's always in the military environment. Yeah. So then you go into MaxFax, you go, okay, it was in civilian hospital environment. And I think broadening yourself and doing courses, whether it's leadership, whether it's business, whether it's Paul Tipton's clinical courses, which are fantastic, whether it's Ashley Latter's communication courses, all these courses are broadening that people should do. Okay, and I did those. And I never always, Lara used to laugh, she said, I don't know why you're doing these courses, but I would use these courses then to go, right, okay, well, I know what good leadership looks like. I'm pretty well versed on good leadership now in an austere environment, in a troubled environment. And so I used all of that knowledge to then find a business that I wanted to buy down in the West Country. With Lara being pregnant, she was coming out of work, and we had a house still in Somerset, so we wanted to move back down there. And yeah, we just looked online, saw a practice for sale, a little one that we could afford. We'd saved up a bit of money, living in cheap accommodation, and paid back the student debt and all that type of stuff. And then ended up putting down on a little above a shop dental practice in the city centre of Exeter. But I do think one of the biggest strengths is that I wasn't tainted by the way that the dentistry industry is in the UK. Whether that's, people always think they know how things should be run or done, and this is how it works, son, sort of stuff. Yeah. And because I didn't work in the NHS, I'd worked in the military. I hadn't seen. We only knew one standard, which was high standards. Okay, so a patient of mine in the military would go to another dentist. So high standards are critical in anything that we do. And I came out, and Lara and I went to look at a different practice where we were going to do a partnership. And I said, do you know, if I buy that practice, it's going to be the end of my life, because I can't cope with some of those partners and the way that they're tainted by the industry. I think that the standards aren't high enough. I don't think the building's neat enough. I don't think the staff are well trained. I don't think the clinical work is good enough. Now, I'm not saying that I set the world on fire clinically. I'm passable. I'm a well-calibrated dentist. But I know high standards, and I know that I come across low standards all the time in the work that I do now. And my biggest drive is to raise standards of leadership, of being in control of your business. And then, funny old thing, Lara and I discussed it, and I said, well, let's have a crack at buying a practice, because we can't do any worse. And if we, like I say, no one's dying. And if I don't want to work in an industry where we're working to low standards, where we're compromising, be that the NHS or be that any other den plant, sort of the capitation schemes, that sort of thing. I don't want to work in the industry, and I'll just quit, and we'll go do something else with our careers, and we'll go work in a different area. And I think that's the biggest strength, is that when I pay for advice or when I'm trained on things, I follow it, and I value it, and I put it into practice. I don't really question it. I follow the advice.
Guys, as you know, I am the lead tutor of the Hedro Academy Vertical Preparation course. Now, we have put together this beautiful vertical preparation kit, which has been beautifully made by Former Dental Supplies. Simon at Former has kindly agreed to give one lucky winner of this podcast a kit completely free of charge, which retails normally at £220 plus VAT. So all you have to do to win one of these fantastic vertical preparation kits is just give us a like, subscribe to the podcast and share it, and leave a comment below, and we will pick one lucky winner every podcast, and Burr Kit will be finding itself in your clinic. Okay, so yeah, great guys. The Horacle Burr Kit. by Hedro Academy and Former Dental Supplies. Can I ask? Because I've got, my own courses, and I've got many dentists who come and ask me about where I started out. And, I've run a few clinics myself, as you know.
Yes. Very successfully.
Thank you. I think they could be better. I'm learning, and that's how we met. But the question I always get asked is, when do you know the time is right to buy a practice? And, how do you go about doing it? And you've had all these questions before from people as well. So, obviously, my opinion is you're either just going to do it, you're built that way, or you're not going to do it. And there are people that are built a certain way to go on that path, and there are people that aren't. But just, again, listening to your story, I just find that jump, and I just want to explore that jump. That, first of all, you haven't got that much of a solid passion for clinical dentistry, but you're competent, you're good at it, right? You've been in the military now. And then now you've been in the Navy, right?
Yeah.
Same. Apologies.
Catch-all. That's all good, mate. It's all good.
But you've been in the Navy. Yeah. Now you've ended that time, all those years of service, and now you're just gonna go and you've done some max fax training, and now you're just gonna take the plunge, which many dentists do not do in their whole career. And you're just going to go for it. You're going to buy a business. And not only do you buy a business, man, you make a fucking success of it. Yeah. We're going to talk about how successful it is in a second. But I just want to explore. What is in your mindset. What makes you take that leap? It's your first practice. You never run a dental practice before.
No, I hadn't even really worked in one.
Yeah. So what the hell? Come on, Zach. Come on.
Yeah. Okay, why?
Tell me why.
I just honestly, I wanted to be in control, and I wanted to control the money.
Right.
Because you think the military world's brutal, but the civilian world, especially around money, is a lot more brutal.
Right.
I was used to a salary, and the paycheck at the end of the month would come in. And I worked in London, in West London, moonlighting. You do gardening leave when you come to the end of your 7-year contract for a few months. And I started to work in a local dental practice, and I didn't get paid properly.
Right.
Got ripped off. But I was already paid. I was still paid by the military, but he didn't pay me. He did loads of. It was the best thing he did, actually. It was probably the best £1,000 I spent. He kept the £1,000 of. He's a well-known dentist. He has a group in West London. I won't tell where. But he treated all his associates like this, and they all, he wasn't very popular, and the places were run down. And I thought, oh, okay, this is the real world. The real world's a lot more brutal than the military, really. And I thought, right. I said, and I came home, and when Lara and I talked about it, I said, we've got to control the money. If we're going to make a success of this, is that the standards are too low in these little practices, and the money isn't, and we're not controlling the money. We can't be beholden to someone else that isn't a government organisation. So what we did was I spoke to David Brewer of Frank Taylor and Associates. He's my broker. He always has been, and I've got to mention him because I like David. He's an Arsenal fan. I'm a Liverpool fan.
Oh.
But we're getting controversial now, aren't we? But other than that, he's brilliant, and he's raised over £2 million for me now over the years. David Brewer, I really like him.
Yeah.
And so he spoke to us. We had, I think, 25 grand. And if I'm honest with you, dentistry, I knew it was an industry where we could financially dope the practice. Is that if we kept costs low, Lara works on reception with a newborn baby. Just about got over that 10 years later, and helped with the reception side of things, and I bought a practice that was within my means. So we paid a deposit of 10%. David Brewer raised us 260 grand, something like that, and then we bought a dental practice that had been on the market for 2 years, and it was just a decision. It's as simple as that. I think people overthink things. It's like, if you ever get frustrated with an owner who is not treating staff as well as you would, then you go, that's tick number one. I can look after the staff. Well, there's a lot of tools out there to manage money, financial command and control. People are surrounded by brands and identity. Well, they can put their own brand on a business. Okay, and they're the 3 pillars I find that dental practices are built upon. Now, I didn't know that at the time. I've sort of codified it now, having talked about this incessantly over the years.
Yeah.
But at the time, it was a bit of a no-brainer. Let's just buy this practice. It's cheap enough. The costs aren't too high. And what can go wrong? No one's dying. And the other thing is they put security against our home at the time. And it was just after the financial crash. And there was no equity in it. So we had nothing to lose. They couldn't take my dentistry degree away from me. I could still go and work as an associate. I think people, the fear of loss is so much stronger than the fear of, gain. And my fear of loss, well, my loss was a lot more dramatic. Could have been previously, a few years previously. So I never feared it. Now, I would urge youngsters who are looking at this and say, well, okay, what are you really going to lose if you don't find something that you put your stamp on? Okay, what's the worst that can happen? Okay, you run out of money. Well, you could do more dentistry. Prop it up a little bit in the first couple of years. We all have to go through that hardship in the first few years. You all have to do far too much dentistry, and it's all stressful, and it's 360-degree pressure. So you can dope your business with finances by doing more dentistry, So you look at it and you think, well, where's the risk? There wasn't a risk, really. And with a blank canvas, Lara and I looked at it and we entered into it. Lara's very supportive over the years, has always said, yes, go for it, go for it, go for it. Never really questions decisions, knows that it will work out in the end. I also think as well, there's a little bit of a devil in me in that the Marine Commandos have this little saying, and it's probably awful in today's times, but it pays to be a winner. Okay, so in Exeter, where we bought the practice, there was 10 practices within a mile of us, and so there was 10 private practices. And you thought, do you know what? I fancy a crack at that. I fancy it making a bit of a stamp on it. No one knows who I am. I don't know any of the politics of the city. They all often have these closed markets where everyone does their thing and no one steps out of it. Well, I was coming into it and we were just going to chuck the rug up in the air, and just absolutely, change how Exeter's dentistry was delivered. And I don't think they saw us coming, that we literally didn't care about anyone's opinion about what we were going to do. We changed the practice. It was called Castle Square Dental. And we called it the Exeter Dental Centre, completely arrogantly. But it pays to be a winner. And I think people are too timid. And I think people think too much about what people think of them. So that's what I mean by a blank canvas. I got a business coach as well in 2012. And again, Lara supported that. It was expensive at the time, but it was the best money we spent having a business coach. I think everyone should have a coach. It's helpful. Now, it's easy for me to say, I am a coach. I do consultancy, but pretty much everyone that I work with has a coach, whether it's, and I don't really mind which coach or consultant, so long as you have someone that fits you and your brand and gives you what you need, the support, because it's lonely as a business owner. And they'll often see, don't do that. We'll just steer you away from that error. So it was good that we had a coach. And like I say, he gave us a playbook. And I don't think he expected us to sort of finish with him so soon. But we had a playbook and we went for the playbook that he gave us. And I just said, okay, how do you do this? He said, do it like this. And I was the only one that, I was in like a little group because that was all we could afford. There was 8 of us. And everyone was like arguing and like being quite cynical about the advice. And I was like, literally, we're all paying him for advice. Let's just follow the playbook. So I said to Lara, I'm just going to follow what he says. Okay, because I don't know this industry. And we followed that industry. So there's lots of little nuggets in there for people who are looking at doing a dental practice, who are starting out. But what it gives you as a family, a small business, is just phenomenal as an industry. We are blessed to be in this industry, absolutely blessed. Because, again, there's a lot of financial support available, be it through patients, through established broker markets. But it's also very satisfying in that you take people out of pain and you help people. And whether it's aesthetics or whether it's healthcare, I mean, it's a really interesting healthcare model. And so I'd say to anyone that's starting out is to go for it wholeheartedly and don't worry too much about the downside.
Yeah. So can I ask you a bit more about then the growth of that business?
Yeah.
Because that in itself is a phenomenal story.
Yeah.
So how did you start out and what was in place and where did you take it?
So it was 3 old boy partners who wanted to retire. And for the 2 years it was on the market, everyone was trying to get them to stay. And I think this is another top tip. Buy the business and let the partners go. So do the opposite of what the corporates do, especially if you're an independent, okay? Because the worst 3 months were the month 1 retired, month 2 never retired. And month 3, the third one retired, and they were the worst 3 months of owning the business. And we owned it for just 4.5 years. It was turning over, I think it was turning over just shy of 500 grand. It wasn't it was above a shop, so it only had like one of these little door entrances, go up the stairs to it. The dentists, bless them, had decided they didn't need to do a course in 30 years because they were Birmingham graduates and they were very good graduates and they didn't need to know anymore. I think, okay, fine.
Different era.
Didn't believe in the CQC, didn't believe in CPD. They knew how the world worked and they were great relationship builders. Well, that was a great opportunity because there's so much untreated disease in the patients because it was all patchwork quilt dentistry. So one, you then have potential. So another top tip is to look for the potential. You know, you don't really necessarily want someone else's vision that you pay £1 million or £2 million for. You want a rough diamond where you see there's a lot of patients, probably on relationships, where the dentistry is like, oh, you'll be okay. You know, we'll just patch this up. So it was turning over 500k. We bought it for 280k. Every year it grew. So the first year it grew 300 to 800,000. And then the next year it went to 1.2 million. The next year it went to 1.6 million. The next year it went for 2.1 million. And then the turnover eventually was going to hit 2.5 million. All based on high standards, change everything about the whole business. Don't worry about the staff that might not be on the journey. Hope that they come with you on the journey and be welcoming and be supportive of them. But a lot of the time they're of the mindset and the culture of the previous owners. So we never had to sort of get rid of anybody, like, or, you know, go through disciplinary process as such. We just raised standards. And then because we raised the standard of dentistry, we recruited a couple of associates to replace the guys that left, the partners. We had a mantra where we refer no work out. And what that meant was I had to recruit specialists or people who could do the most advanced dentistry, implants, ortho. And everyone then has a skill set. We then opened 7 days a week. Now everyone goes, what, you made your team work 7 days a week? No, mate, no. What we did was we went on a 5-week rota where everyone had to work 1 weekend in 5. And then they had the Friday and the Monday off of that week. And lo and behold, people liked those weekends because they could have a quiet weekend on a Saturday and Sunday in a city centre. And then what happened was we became the emergency centre for the whole of Exeter. And so you get so many emergency patients that the associates then wanted to come in on a Saturday and Sunday, and they'd be paying the nurses extra to come in and nurse for them. So we'd end up with 3 or 4 dentists on a Saturday and a Sunday. But we have to have this mantra. Again, it comes from the military, probably one in, all in. Okay? So I had to work the weekends. Often I talk to clients now with practices, they say, oh, there's this associate's on a master's and he'll work the Saturday and Sunday. I'm like, that's not going to cut it. You've got to build a team of 10 clinicians. You need at least 6 surgeries for this. It's a full service practice, and you need to refer no work out, possibly, as opposed to, you know, lower 8s and things like that that need to go to hospital. And if you haven't got the clinical skill set to do it, or the wherewithal, the equipment, then get it, then recruit. To do that, you need a strong brand. So that's why we changed the name to the Exeter Dental Centre. We open 7 days a week, but it became just your fixed cost then are split over 7 days instead of 5 days. So there's all good business practices to it. And what was interesting was when it went from 500k turnover to 2.5 million in 4 years, I dropped a day of dentistry every year to pretty much, I got down to 2 days. I think I started at 5, but only lasted 6 months at that. And then I got down to 2 days. And then for me, the right amount of dentistry was 0. Whereas a lot of clients that I work with, some of them enjoy implants or vertical preparations on ceramics, your raison d'etre, and they enjoy that and they want to focus on their niche of dentistry, and that's cool. My niche of dentistry, well, I did a master's in business from Exeter University. It's not my role is to take responsibility for everything that happens in that business. I'm responsible. If the staff muck up, it's my fault. If they're not trained well enough, it's my fault. If the patients aren't cared well enough for, it's my fault. I'm responsible. Now that's the cost that I pay as the owner. There is no blame. It's my fault. The systems weren't good enough. And it became a very systemized practice, but with a heart and soul, I'd like to think.
Yeah.
But taking that responsibility is another thing for dentists looking at. It's essentially on us, and that's the cost you pay, but the reward obviously is profit. It should be 20% roughly in a well-run big practice like that. So 20% of 2.5 million is nearly 500,000, and I wasn't doing any dentistry.
Wow.
It was running itself. There's layers and layers and layers we could deep dive into, which I talk to clients about.
Yeah.
How you get nurses running well, how you get the front of house team working well. I'm really interested in the TCO concept now. I've been a bit of a Luddite with that. But how you get clinicians working well, quarterly clinicians meetings, the study clubs, how you build it on a good academic clinical background or baseline that then you can grow off. It then doesn't need you as an owner. It doesn't need Mike Hesketh. It becomes the Exeter Dental Centre as a third party, as a brand. And people take it far too personally that it's all about them and the harder they work. The only caveat to that is when you invest in heavily like we're investing in marketing. We dominated Exeter for marketing. We had 200 new patients a month. Back in the days when it was difficult, pre-COVID. We dominated Exeter with marketing, but through Google reviews in 2012, 2013, we hammered Google reviews. We did SEO pay-per-click at the time. I know the market's moving in digital marketing, but it's interesting. We kind of just sucked all of the new patients up in Exeter, which pays to be a winner, and some well-known business owners tried to open up down the street. Didn't quite work out for them, unfortunately, but worked out for us. And we grew a business that, like I say, had 10 clinicians, 40 staff. And I ended up doing the morning huddle with Poppy, my daughter, who went to Cathedral School in the city centre. So I'd do the morning huddle, she'd sit in my office, and then I'd walk around to school. And then I'd go to the gym.
Wow.
Yeah. And we'd have these really super powered, young non-degree educated females running the business for us. So we would have a really good card of what I call sergeants. You can sort of get a trend of, this learning that I had from the military all the way through.
You're touching on it now, and I was going to ask you this. So can I try and tie the two together? So what is it that you took from your military experience?
Well, it was leadership and taking responsibility for the outcome. That's one.
Yeah.
Follow the advice is another.
Okay.
What's the worst that could happen?
Yeah.
Is another. There is no reward without risk. I think that you can't work your way to wealth. I think you have to work and risk your way to wealth. Okay. Does that make sense? Yeah. So you've got to take the risk. Okay. People think, I'll get wealthy, and they look over the shoulder at other people by working harder and working harder. I'm like, yeah, you have to work, but you have to take the risk. And unfortunately, that's the price we pay.
What does the risk look like? So what risks?
Well, there's, the dental industry is a small industry. There's the, what you're doing here, is a high profile podcast, which is fantastic. And there's always pressure from your peers. The courses that you've ran, the courses that you've launched, the businesses that you've launched in Leeds very successfully is a risk because people look and people watch. So there's that social pressure, the peers. There's the financial pressure of being able to pay the bills. And then there's also the health pressure, the toll it takes either on mental or physical health. And none of these are to be sniffed at. And I think they all equally weigh. But I would argue that as an associate, some of the risks and some of the costs are worse. How much are you willing to sacrifice your life for? 50k a year, 100k a year, 150k a year as an associate, putting up with someone else's standards, low standards. I think that risk is greater. Because we are in an industry that's booming.
Yeah.
There's no shortage of patients. There's a shortage of clinicians, which we can talk about, and how to combat that. But there's no shortage of patients. And so, there's always pressure, isn't there?
Yeah.
And you feel it as much as me, as we launch things and as we try and do interesting things that we find professionally stimulating.
Yeah.
There's always pressure.
No, I'll be honest. I look at you and I'm just like, wow, how does he do it? Honestly, I do, and that's why you're here talking to us about it. Can I ask a very specific question? And it's kind of like, maybe, how come I haven't asked this yet? But this word leadership,
Yeah.
is bandied about so much. Let's define it. What is leadership
To me.
and what is leadership, and how have you applied leadership that you've observed in your military training, and how have you applied it to business?